right, let's get a little more excitement. How are you everybody doing today? All right, awesome. Yeah, it's been a great conference. I've been coming here, I think this is my third or fourth time, and just watching it grow and all the different companies that are new people come in, and it's really doing a lot of really good things for Maine and the surrounding area as well. So definitely give yourselves a hand for being here, showing up, and taking part in all this. So my name is David Romero. I'm Wipfli. I'm Wipfli's Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. We're a public accounting and consulting advisory firm. So we have a big office here in Maine, New Hampshire, and like 54 other offices across the country and the world. And so I've been leading our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, to include our disability efforts, for about the last 5 years and everything. So been a really great experience. And joining me are our three panelists. So starting from left to right is going to be Eric Campbell, Vice President of Education Services at Spurwink. And then Darren Smart, Program Manager of All Tech at Spurwink as well. George Mudagu Mokoko, Founder of Ladder to the Moon Network and Residential Director at Serenity Residential Care. So please give them a hand. So what are we talking about here today? You know, people with disabilities across not only Maine, across the country, across the world, historically and presently do face a lot of challenges in the workplace, right? You know, there has been a lot of change, especially in the last 5 years to 8 years and post-pandemic, as you know, increased remote work and just other things that have been going on with technology and improvements in technology. A lot more people are able to enter the workforce with disabilities that were not able to. And then many others are able to get more gainful or employment, or in some cases, maybe they were underemployed, right? Maybe they had degrees or special technical knowledge, and maybe they just weren't working in the field of their choice. But there's just been changes now that have allowed a lot more people to enter those types of careers and really elevate their career. So that's where we're at now. But that being said, a lot of things to be proud of in terms of changes and everything. But at the same time, there's still a lot of work to be done. And one example I'll give you here in Maine, you know, as we all know, Maine's experiencing some workforce challenges in terms of, you know, needing people to fill roles that may not be able to right now. But disability is still a significant factor in a lot of working age people in the labor force. Close to 1/3 have a disability. And, you know, according to a CWRI report, there's about, you know, there's 1/3 have a disability, and there's just a lot of businesses that just aren't able to tap into that network of talent. And so there's a lot of jobs that could be filled by people with disabilities, but due to various reasons we'll get into in just a bit, they're not able to fill those roles, right? And we have people that are underemployed and unemployed. So we'll learn a little bit more about some of those challenges and some solutions from our experts here as well. So the goals for this panel are going to be to learn how to effectively support employees and applicants with disabilities, enhance communication and learn best practices for providing accommodations, which can be, you know, could be a complicated topic and everything. So here to provide some expertise. And then mental and behavioral health support for people from all backgrounds. So those are the three things that we're really going to touch on and everything. At the same time, if anyone has any questions, either you can wait to the end, but if there's just something just burning and you have a question for myself or our panelists, please just raise your hand and we'll work to get it addressed. Sound good? Okay, so, you know, I want to talk a little about a couple of different things in terms of best practices for inclusions related to persons with disabilities. So a lot of times, I mean, you know, it's a big scope. There's a lot of different types of disabilities out there, right? We all work in different types of industries and workplace settings, right? That might come with their own challenges in terms of how to address this, right? And then all of us and our leaders at whatever organization we belong to, you know, we're all starting somewhere. Some of us are very aware. Some of our employees in the organizations we work for might have different systems and processes in place. And some of us in our organizations may be starting from the beginning, right? And either way, it's okay. It's all about making those efforts and having a plan in place to try to learn and address many of those different things. But just want to stress, it has a big scope. So one of the main things to do at your organization is to conduct a needs assessment. So really what you're doing is you're taking a look at your workforce, you know, your facilities. In many cases, some of us might come from places where we have multiple facilities. And you're working to say, what are our gaps? What are some things out there in terms of that we could be doing that we're not doing? And what are some good things that we are doing that we need to continue doing? So that might be conducting an assessment of your facilities, for example. Like I can tell you for my employer, we got 54 offices. Not all are where they need to be, and it takes time in some cases. Sometimes it could be multi-million-dollar investments, right? You might need to, sometimes we might be leasing space in a building that we don't own, and that building might not be fully accessible for all people with disabilities. So, if you're in a 10-year contract with that, with that facility, leasing space, I mean, it's not something you can just change overnight, right? You got to work with different stakeholders and different things, and it could cost significant amounts of money. In other cases, there's small incremental changes that might not cost anything, right? Or might cost small amounts. So it's just really taking a look at everything related to your workforce, your facilities, practices and processes, and figuring out what are those gaps. And again, these are things that you can do over time. It's not something that you're going to do overnight, right? Take a look at your website. Is it ADA compliant? If not, what are you doing to address some of that? Because sometimes there's just small things that we can do to address that. Another thing is going to be accommodation resources. So accommodations, again, it's a big topic as well. There's all different types of people that may require different types of accommodations based on their need. Some of those accommodations are things that can be easily done. I've seen people request standing desk, right? Which we can get them a standing desk, that's no problem, right? But in other cases, there just might be things that people are asking for based on their need that might come with a cost or might come with some complications, right? And so sometimes it's about reviewing each accommodation request to make sure that it's something that you can accommodate, or maybe there's an alternate thing that you can do to accomplish the same thing, right? But those are important. Just making sure you understand how to process those accommodations, that whatever individual handles those requests, that, you have something set up so people feel comfortable and are able to make those requests, and then who's ever handling those requests, they're knowledgeable and they understand how to work on those things. Because, not all individuals, right? I come from HR background. I can tell people are in different places when it comes to familiarity with handling accommodations, right? And it can be complicated. And we'll talk a little bit more about that throughout the presentation. The other is culture and flexibility. So I think this is a huge one, in my opinion, because all other things we're talking about, accommodations and a needs assessment, the bedrock, the foundation for that is you've got to have a culture and the flexibility to be able to address some of these different things, right? So from a culture perspective, this is the thing. I spent like 10 years in the military. When I got out of the military, I didn't want to self-identify as being in the military because I had no idea how that information was going to be used, right? I didn't know. I didn't understand. And so the same thing with people with disabilities in many cases. Sometimes people might be skeptical. If I identify that I have a disability, how am I going to be treated? Is my boss going to know about it? Is it going to negatively reflect on me? What does this mean, right? So organizations have to have a culture of understanding, belonging, that people feel comfortable identifying anything unique about them, right? Whether they're a veteran or have a disability or just something else. So that takes some work from an organization, right? Because sometimes we could say, hey, we want to do these other things, but if we don't have a culture in place, if people are saying the wrong thing, or, to be honest, in some workplaces, people with a disability might face, some kind of comments or just some kind of treatment, coming from leadership or teammates or, just in the workplace, right? So it's just really important to make sure that that culture exists. And as you're working to address these other things we talked about, like accommodations, that the organization and leadership is living up to these values and, the commitment to making people with disabilities feel welcome and included in the workplace. Or else these other things, they're just not going to work effectively. Does that make sense? You get it? Yeah? Okay. Okay, well, great. So we'll talk a little bit more about many of these other things. And again, for some of you, let me just ask, for everybody in this audience, is the disability space, is it something you're pretty new at? Just kind of raise your hand, and it's okay, right? Is this something you're kind of new at? Raise them high so we can just kind of see where everybody's at. And then for others in this room, do you feel, pretty much you've been working in this space or pretty familiar? Just raise your hand as well. Okay, so we've got a good mix. So again, don't feel, feel comfortable asking questions. We've got experts here who have been in this space for a long time, and we're here to help each other and be resources for each other as well. Okay. Okay, great. So I'm going to turn it over to Darren and Eric right now, who are going to run us through a presentation.
Check, check. Yeah, I have some. There they are. Awesome. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thanks for having us. My name's Darren. I'm an occupational therapist and assistive technology professional. And this is Eric Campbell. He's my supervisor for Alltech, works at Spurwink as the Vice President of Educational Services. So I'm going to talk about mainly assistive technology. I have a little PowerPoint to run through of my program that's located here in Portland. Go ahead to the next slide if you don't mind. So assistive technology, David already mentioned some examples of that, like the standing desk, but here's a broad definition. It's any device, piece of equipment, or product that makes it easier for someone with a disability to live more independently and safely, work at a job, learn in school, get about their community, or pursue play and leisure. Now, if you take that definition, look at it, you could strike with a disability and apply it to any of us in the room, anyone you see in today's day and age with the technology that we require, anything from just enlarging your iPhone font size so that it's a little bit easier to read is a benefit of assistive technology. And this is a wide-reaching definition. Go ahead to the next slide. So it's not just computers and mobile devices. There's low-tech devices. Even our pens and pencils would be considered assistive technology because they assist us to perform a function. Now, it could be low-tech, mid-tech, where maybe it has batteries or it has some electronic components. Depending on your familiarity with technology, what some people consider mid-tech might be advanced technology for someone else. Or there's a high-tech category, and typically, at least in a professional sense, high-tech involves things that are customized for an individual. So it's not something you just go in and buy off the shelf. That's another way to think of it, is mainstream technology versus individualized, more disability-geared technology. There's hard and soft technology, hard technology being actual physical devices, and soft technology being software or even just strategies that we might use during the day to help us be more independent, such as keeping a schedule or giving someone visual cues on how to perform a task. Those are all examples of different levels of assistive technology. Another big category within assistive technology is durable medical equipment. My program does address this as well, which I'll talk about in a minute. And a good way to think about assistive technology more so is that it's addressing a specific function. So there's hearing technology, there's vision technology, there's daily living technology. It's categorized federally for our program, but a way to think about it is more so, I want to perform such and such a task. What technology is going to get me to be able to do that task more independently, safely, and efficiently? Go ahead, please. So this is the store in Portland. It's attached to the Hannaford by Back Cove, right on Forest Avenue, tucked next to the dog groomer. We are funded primarily by something called the 21st Century Assistive Technology Act. This is a federal program that gives every state money to develop assistive technology programming. In Maine, that program is called Maine Site, and they partner with different locations, including Alltech, to offer a variety of assistive technology services to the public. So it's not just limited to a work capacity, although it can help with that. It's for families, individuals, health representatives, therapists, anybody can access it. So the services we have are assistive technology loans, demonstrations, durable medical equipment reuse, assistive technology assessments, and public awareness events. Go ahead. So now I'm going to break down just quickly each of those services. AT demonstrations being comparing different similar devices to help someone choose technology solutions. Especially now there's just unknowable amounts of technology out there, and it's rapidly increasing every day. So for someone that's navigating this for the first time or has been an experienced user and is looking for something new, demonstrations can help to make a choice, because even among, you take the most basic technology, there's little differences that could make or break its potential for someone to implement. So differences in size, shape, function, and more can be demonstrated. And then, yeah, an example, even standard walkers can vary by brand. Even just how they fold up, that can make the difference for somebody. Go ahead. The reuse program that we have at Alltech is a program for secondhand medical equipment. So the community donates gently used medical devices that I get cleaned up, sanitized, assessed for viability, and then I offer those things either for someone to borrow short-term for free. So say you have a temporary need, that like you're having a hip replacement or something going on like that, that you just need it for 2 months or whatever, you can borrow it for free without having to invest in that temporarily, especially with how expensive these things are. And then if someone wanted to buy something, it's at a much cheaper price than if you were to get it new. And then I do help repair client equipment as I can, depending on the situation, if they bring it in. Go ahead. Here's an example. It looks kind of crazy right there, but it's a small store, but here's an example of all the different devices that I get through the reuse program. So things to help with ambulation, like walkers, canes, crutches, those things, wheelchairs, bathroom equipment. I do take power wheelchairs and scooters, and then just miscellaneous other things, ranging from bed rails to Hoyer lifts, pillboxes, really as much as I can that I can get back out into the community. Go ahead. Another feature of the Maine State Assistive Technology Program Maine site, they run this online loan library called AT for Maine, which is just at atformaine.org. So those different partner organizations, which is Alltech, Pine Trees Society, and Maine site in Augusta, they offer different catalogs of assistive technology that people can borrow. And you can see all those devices available, including the ones at my store, at that website. So this is a way for anyone to trial equipment. So say you're considering work accommodations, what's out there, what might work, what might not work. If the items are in this library, you can borrow them to try it before any money's spent. Maybe because you might get a bad fit, and that could lead to technology abandonment and frustrate the person, and maybe I guess put a negative connotation on them trying technology in the future. So this is a good way to try those things first before that experience. And you can search on the website by keywords or browse by category. Go ahead to the next slide. You can see this here. Here's a screenshot of the homepage. So at the top, you can search for something that you're looking for, or if this were to scroll down, you would see multiple categories beneath here. So if you didn't have any real specific ideas, but you knew, like I was saying earlier, if you knew something you were trying to tackle, a functional skill or something you were trying to work around, you could browse through the categories here to get ideas for what's out there. And the other part being, if you don't see something on here, you can let Maine site know, because occasionally they do have funds to add new items, and we want it to be a collaborative partnership with the community of Maine, so that we're making sure that our catalog is full of devices that will be used. Go ahead. Another way to address individual needs is through AT assessments, and there are different organizations that do these in Maine, including Alltech. So it's an individual assessment with someone that identifies technology devices, software, and strategies to benefit that client's functional goals. So this can take place in a workplace through like Voc Rehab, or if the company wants to pay for that service, they can be done for schools, Maine Care, and each assessment kind of follows this flow where there's an initial review of the medical information, all relevant information, and then the in-person assessment would happen with the assistive technology professional. It can be done through telehealth as well. This is really a information gathering session where the applicable team members, guardians are all involved, the clients there, to discuss what the goals are, whether that's work related or at home self-care related, whatever the case may be, to gather what the client's goals, strengths, barriers, what their functional performance and independence looks like, their range of motion, all these sorts of different specifics that'll help guide the decision on what technology could be a good fit. So once that's done, the professional then researches what's out there in the marketplace for technology, assistive technology, writes a report that includes all this information, including the recommendations for what devices they would suggest, what the prices may be, and where to find those things to purchase them. In that report will also be included if there's any chances out there to trial these devices before the company or whatever payer purchases them. So like someone might check on AT for Maine to see if the devices they're recommending are available for borrowing before the person purchases them. And then once the trials are done, that gives you up more information, obviously, on whether or not those things worked or didn't, and then more research and recommendations can be made from there, and training can happen if the payer source allows for it on how to use those devices. Go ahead. Public service, public awareness service that we do for Alltech, looks a lot like doing presentations on different assistive technology topics, depending on what's asked for. But the main goal being to increase the public's knowledge of AT and AT services like what we have here in Maine. I've done tabling events, presentations, and Maine site does do monthly free webinars that are really great. Wide variety of speakers that do these different topics, all related to assistive technology. They just are doing some assistive technology travel webinars for people like with disabilities to learn best ways to approach, luxury like cruises and like how to go, just traveling. Very cool. So I've done 2 there. I've done a guide to Maine medical equipment reuse and one on iOS and iPad OS accessibility. Okay. And then on the website, I do keep a list of secondhand DME programs across Maine. There's many different loan closets through Lions clubs, churches, and those sorts of things. There's about 50 that I've been able to gather from other resources and calling around. So those are all listed and organized by county to help people try to find equipment. And then I also have a glossary that just provides general information about these common devices to help people know what's out there and what could help them. Go ahead. That's it. Eric, do you have anything?
Can you hear me? Oh, there you go. So just a couple things I would add to Darren's presentation. One of the biggest things we're getting into right now are the workplace AT assessments and trying to explore accommodations with different companies. And this is overall a relatively inexpensive process. So the typical AT assessment is anywhere from $500 to $800. And I know that's money, definitely. But what we often find is that a lot of the accommodations end up being very simple and relatively inexpensive accommodations. So I think that can sometimes be a hesitation for some companies. This is going to be a very expensive process. We're going to spend thousands and thousands. But what we found is most of the time, it's a relatively inexpensive process that allows the individual to increase their ability to perform the duties of their job. So it's a win-win, and the employee also feels that support. So I definitely would encourage those, not just because we do them, but it's a great resource to look at different accommodations in the workforce for individuals through that assessment process. The other piece that I would add is all of the presentations that Darren does as part of our grant through Mainsight. Those are free presentations. So he's also available to come to different companies or workplaces and talk about some of the things that are there, like the iOS accessibility and different things that most people already have on their computer, right? Or are free software available. So I would highly recommend that resource as well. And that's a free presentation or some free training if he could come out and do that with employers or employees.
Well, thank you, Eric and Darren. Some great resources, great organization doing great things, so thank you both. Okay, we're going to go into some questions for the panel now. And again, if anybody has any questions, we'll leave some time at the end for you to be able to ask myself or the panelists anything. Want to start, George? I was wondering if you could give us some examples of just some insight in terms of your experience in working with people with mental and physical disabilities. Just anything you want to share.
Yes. So what I can do, maybe my just presentation or my sharing today is just going to be based on my own experience, and so I will give you a little bit of background of myself, and then I'll go into what I do and how I've come to know the disability services. So I'm George Budagu Makoko from originally from DRC Congo. I was born there and grew up there. And when I completed my high school, it was a time when genocide in Rwanda had just ended, and I ended up moving to Rwanda, and I lived there and I went to college and did the business administration, graduated there, and then I moved here in 2002. And when I moved here, I did not speak English at all because I grew up speaking different languages, including French and Swahili, Kinyarwanda, and Lingala, and the other things. English has never been any of my experiences in terms of speaking. So when I got here, although I had education, I realized quickly that I was going to have to deal with the English. And I went to USM and took some English classes. And so I was in between two things. I have experience, I knew I had education, but yet I could not speak English, and therefore those were the limitations that prevented me from accessing good paying jobs. So I did all kinds of jobs in between. I worked in factory, and then when I started really getting into knowing English, I got a professional job at Avesta Housing, which we provided affordable housing. And at the same time, because I was young and energized and had the time, and I say I can only settle for one job, so I had to do another job, and that's because I had a huge family back home that I had to support. And so in 2006, I will never forget, it was in summertime that I was introduced to working into the group home or mental health services, so as a DSP. And I will never forget, one of my friends told me that, look, there's a job here that you can do over the weekend and still work your week job. And I said, what is the job? And he said, you're working with people with disability. So I went to a training, and then I went to start providing services. And that really got my attention. And I was asking, who are these people? And so these are the people with their own families, but because of the family situation, they could not afford to live with them or take care of them. So therefore, they handed them off to agency that will take care of them take care of them from there. And I thought, this is a country where they have resources to take care of people with disabilities. And that was like really eye-opening. Because in Africa, there's no such a thing as a mental health or services that we have to provide to people with disability. So that was like really something that got my attention. I said, like, this is something. And the other thing that got my attention, and as you read, you have to walk through the books about the clinical book of somebody that you're taking care of, and see their background, the history, family history, and all other diagnoses and everything. And I realized, like, okay, in my knowledge was that, okay, somebody is born with disability. That's something but I didn't realize that there are also people with high-profile people, some of them doctors and people who were able and who got into accidental, like a really serious accident, and became disabled and therefore could not take care of themselves. And they end up being taken care of with other people. And so that was like really mind opening. So quickly, so I worked there from 2006 until 2019 when with my friends started our own agency, and it's called Serenity Residential Care. And here's why, like one of the motivations. So we had the experience, we've worked as a DSPs and we've done all kinds of legwork. And then it came to a point where we realized, okay, this can become, or we know how to provide services. We know how we can help people. And why can we just start our own agency where we can just put those background and experiences into work in a more serious way? And when I shifted from being a DSP and becoming a business owner or agency owner, that's where I learned so many other things that had no idea. So the regulations and how do you make sure that the person that you're supporting, you're not just providing the basic services, but yet you're helping them to increase from level 1 to level 2 or even 3. So I quickly learned that people that we serve are very well, some of them very capable of doing so many things. But because of the system, because of so many other limitations, they've been just settled to so little and unable to grow to another level. So what we do, our intake is based on 3 things. So first, you sit with somebody and do what they said, assessment of their needs, their goals, aspirations, and then from there, you start building a supporting system that's going to help them first meet their daily needs, second, meet their goals, and the third, aspirations. And now when we talk about aspirations, that's where we go to a walk, so walking. Recently, last year, we went through, I don't know for those of you who are here and who walk into the mental health, there's what they call HCBS, so community-based services that came about, and they was focusing on two major things. First, we gotta make sure that people that we're supporting are also able to access job if they need to. And they have to be included in the community, meaning that they cannot just sit in a house and just watch TV, but they have to be out in the community and do other things like anybody else would like to do. And so what we've been now focusing on is just making sure that we do the assessment of each person and see if they can find a job. So that comes with some training. So first you have to teach them some skills. You ask them what kind of job you would like to do, and they will tell you. If it's working in a restaurant, if working in a warehouse, and then you start looking, this is what you do, the skills that you need to work in a restaurant or in a warehouse or any other job that you would like to do. And from there, you start teaching them the coping skills. How do you how do you interact with other people, communications and relationship, like just to make sure that you're not there and seen as a stranger, but you're somebody who can quickly integrate into the whole working system and be able to provide, to work like anybody else. And so what we've been focusing on now, we help them find a job. When we find a job, we help them maintain the job, because sometimes there can be one bad experience is enough for them to just get out of the system. But we encourage them to be persistent and courageous and making sure that they stay there. And the other thing is that not only maintaining job and see if they can grow within their own work, with their own job. So it's been a quiet experience, and now we're just looking how we can start reaching to, we work with Voc Rehab, which specializes in helping some people with disability, and we want to make sure that anybody who's able to work can find a job, not only find a job, but maintain a job, not only maintaining it, maybe advance in their own job. So that's my 1 cent of sharing.
Thank you for that, George. Can you provide us with just any insight based on your experience in terms of building strong, respectful relationships?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I remember our first member or individual, so we don't call them a client, we call them member of our organization, and we took him from the jail. And this somebody has like a really criminal background, and he was a very nice guy that I've never seen anywhere else. Very respectful, very young and energized. And so we sat with them and they would say, look, we're just getting to know him, and we're thinking, oh, this is somebody who's going to be violent. We're just prepared for anything. And little did we know that he's just a kind soul and somebody who's able to communicate their needs. And so from there, I realized that all they need is just somebody who can pay attention to their needs and their aspirations and their goals in a more intentional way, not just of pretending that you listen. You know, you've seen people come and sit and just because they want to do the paperwork, but when they can see when your attention toward them and you want to support them. And so one of the tips and hints that I will tell you, like, just sit there intentionally and be with them and ask them stories. They will tell you what got them into trouble, what was the experience, and they will also regret the fact that they were in trouble and they want to rebuild their lives. And what I tell you, if you sit there, you'll be amazed to see how good they are and potential they have. So that has now, every time I'm meeting somebody, I don't just sit there and do paperwork. I sit there intentionally, listen to them, and try to support them.
Sir. Any practical tips for effective communication and just understanding individual needs? I know it's something you touched on a little bit, but just any other insight?
Yeah, so the practical one is that, like, first you have to know the person that you're serving, like getting to know the background. Some of them may come with some limitations in terms of speaking. If that's the case, you gotta make sure that you're not speaking loud, you're not speaking quickly, you go to their pace. And once you go there, and then slowly you start building that, they will realize that this is somebody who's not just talking for talking, but somebody who's talking to listen to them, but also hearing back from them. So again, it's just a matter of knowing the person that you're working with and knowing their limitations, their challenges, but also their potentials, and meet them in between intentionally. Again, it has to be purposefully trying to help them and supporting them.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that answer. That makes sense. Any examples of creative, successful solutions you've seen in action?
Yeah, I remember one time we were doing vendor call and we got into somebody, we were interested in somebody who was in Bengal. And this is a very young person, who's, very young actually. And I think, not going into the details, but he needed support to just get out of the out. He was like homeless and didn't have any place. And then so we took him from there, brought him into the South, and so he quickly realized that people were not understanding him. So they had misunderstanding of who he is and what he's capable of doing, and he was trying to convince us, like, look, I'm not what you think I am, because I'm not that crazy, because he had got into little bit of criminal activities. And what he did was, like, I just want to showcase that I'm able to do things, and I'm able to work and live myself for myself, by myself. And so quickly we start working with him and putting small goals, and he was quickly reaching out to them, and another goal, the higher goal, and he reached out to them, and even higher, to a point where he ended up graduating and living by himself. Now he has a job, and he calls me sometimes and saying, I want to meet and talk, and just meet and talk. And I say, I can't believe this is a person that we thought needed a service in the house, but now he's just working independently, paying rent, and looking for housing for himself. It's just an amazing process of helping somebody from point A to point B in a more positive way.
Well, thanks for that answer. And I think George hit on a really critical piece relating to people with disabilities. It's important not to make assumptions around people, right, no matter what their disability is. Best practice is definitely to make sure the information is out there at your organization. So if someone needs an accommodation or has something unique about them, they have the resources. But we're not, you're not, just in practical terms, you're not walking up to someone and saying, hey, I noticed you limping, I brought you this wheelchair so that you can get around. But everybody has their preferences, right? I mean, I know people with different disabilities that, let them make that determination if they cannot do something. But let's not make it to them, because if we unintentionally do that, we can deny them opportunities that might lead to promotions, increased pay, or just a job in itself. So just really something to reflect on, especially when you're working with leaders, hiring managers, and other individuals as well. So really, really important point George touched on. Okay, so some questions for Eric, and just want to touch on a couple of different things. But can you tell us about any strategies for helping people improve their resume and job readiness?
Can you hear me now? There we go. Sorry about that. I mean, the biggest one is really experience. So what I'm lucky enough to be able to do in my role, we have 4 day treatment programs throughout the state, working with kids with IEPs. And part of the program that I think is so special and invaluable is the vocational programming that we're able to do. And so that it's really the experience, that exposure to different job experiences. Um, we're also in a unique position because we get to know the student really well, being with them 30 hours a week. And as part of the IEP process, we're always looking at what accommodations are going to be helpful for the student to learn, and those often translate exactly the same into the workforce. What job experiences they need. Do they need visual supports? Do they need, do they need organizers? All those things that are part of their educational program then can transfer to the vocational program and increase that opportunity for success.
Thanks for that insight. How, any insight or recommendations in terms of matching individuals with disabilities to different types of roles?
Again, opportunities and exploration. So we are very lucky to partner with the Department of Vocational Rehab to do work experiences with a lot of our students. And one of the really exciting new programs that's come out through vocational rehab is the opportunity for our high school seniors, juniors and seniors, to actually work and do paid employment while they're in school. And that's a win-win because it's providing them with experiences, developing those skills. A lot of our kids are not pencil and paper learners, so they're learning things like social skills. They're learning money. They're learning responsibilities, such as getting to work on time, what those work expectations. Also, how do they work through a conflict situation with somebody else in the job market? So these are great. It also provides them credit towards their high school diploma. So we've been very lucky to partner with a bunch of different employers in the greater Portland and Augusta area to allow kids to explore those opportunities.
Okay, that's awesome to hear. Okay, great. Any success stories that show impact on both employers and employees?
We've had several success stories. It may seem like a small number, but we've had 5 students within the last 3 years that have been hired by their employer that they were doing a job experience with. So they had done that first as a volunteer through that agency or that program, that business. Then they had moved up through a collaboration with Voc Rehab to do an official assessment and on-the-job training. And they were able to, they did so well, and the companies really enjoyed having them as employees, and they were meeting their job responsibilities that post-secondary, when they graduated, they were hired by the employer to continue in that company working on, continuing to be employed.
Wow, okay, yeah, no, thank you for that insight. Great, so before we move into some questions for the audience in just a few minutes, so definitely collect your thoughts. But I want to ask each of the panelists, working with people with disabilities or just, I look back at my own experience, like being in the military, being in different companies, sometimes leadership styles need to be a little bit different. There's some characteristics that work well with certain types of teams or certain different industries. When it comes to people working with people with disabilities, are there any traits or characteristics in leaders that you just want to highlight and say, hey, this is what it takes to be successful working with people that just might have different needs?
I think they're essentially the same characteristics that make you a successful leader for anyone, right? Are you flexible? Are you open to conversations? Are you creating a positive atmosphere, positive culture? So a couple of things that I was going to include. Right now, this is a 2023 statistic, but only 38% of individuals with disabilities in the state of Maine are employed. The good news is that is an increase since the pandemic of roughly around 8% over the last few years. A couple of factors that have been positive is first, the workforce shortage is requiring employers to look, to consider how they can adapt jobs to make them successful for more individuals. And then there's more education around individuals' disabilities, how accommodations can be worked into jobs, et cetera. And some of the best practices that, two words that I think are most important are being proactive and being collaborative, right? So again, I'm very lucky to work with kids starting in our job skills program at second grade, third grade, doing in-house jobs. We get that those several years to be able to build those skills. And then what does it mean to be collaborative, being open to providing, creating that culture is important. As an employer, as a supervisor, I think we all need accommodations. So what I really try and do for our kids and for our staff is look at what accommodations make you successful. Not necessarily focusing on what the disability is, but what accommodations do you need to be successful. You know, that old commercial for Hair Club for Men, I'm not just the president, I'm also a client. Well, I had the unfortunate experience last summer of having a vision impairment that luckily was just temporary. But the kind of the odd side effect was I couldn't see any print on a light background, which made almost any piece of paper not readable, websites, etc. So I called Darren, who, luckily because I was his supervisor, rushed right over. And he brought me a bunch of different assistive technology pieces that helped me through that month-long experience until I was able to get surgery and it was able to correct itself. But it was, again, it didn't cost anything. He was able to just take my computer and change the colors of the background for that, other websites, PDFs, all these things that were free, and some of the loaner devices he had at Alltech were able to overcome that, right? And then the other piece that was also significant was the understanding of my employer, right? They were, you know, they understood that with vision impairments, I couldn't drive as much as I used to for my job. So, you know, they offered me things like reduced hours, more office time. So just knowing that positive culture was there and that they would be open to accommodations and they would be willing to work with me was huge in getting through that experience. So being open to those conversations, having clear policies and practices, making accommodations out there, you know, part of your orientation manuals, part of posters on the wall, what supports do you need? So there's a clear process to requesting accommodations, but there's also that understanding among employees that it's not a bad thing to ask for an accommodation, right? We're open and we're positive around that, and everybody needs them, right? I need my smartphone to get me through the day most of the days, right? Or other pieces like that. You know, engaging in that open communication, individualizing accommodations, and then finally, the fourth piece that's really so important is just understanding what reasonable accommodations are. And again, how those can be relatively easy and inexpensive pieces. And I did have a slide. I'm not sure if it's there or not. It's called the Steps to Work. Oh, okay. Well, anyway, it kind of highlights what we do in the at our school. Is kids start out with in-house jobs, providing, just looking at different things around school. Teaches them how to socialize within a smaller, more supportive environment. Filling those job tasks, like you have to show up on time, right? You have to fulfill these job responsibilities. Then we progress to volunteer opportunities within the community, to paid employment, to then vocational rehab, collaboration, and assessment. So I'm going to put in the pitch that we are always looking for new businesses to provide opportunities for our students. It doesn't cost the business anything. We provide job coaching, we provide all the insurance, all those pieces, but having more opportunities, more businesses, will give our kids more exposure to different types of jobs, so they hopefully can leave school with an idea of what they want to do, what they've been successful at, and the accommodations they need to be able to do that going forward.
Yeah, thank you for that, Eric. So a lot of resources out there. I think Eric touched on a couple of themes that should resonate with all of us. You know, again, from a culture perspective, an inclusive environment, I mean, that's just a must, right? Does anybody not want to work in an inclusive environment? I know sometimes inclusion can get thrown out there in today's, language, but we all want to be inclusive, right? Whether we know it or not, and it's just the best kind of environment. The other thing he touched on is kind of like characteristics. He gave some examples of his colleagues, and I mean, they're self-aware, they're helpful, they're empathetic. Those are the kind of characteristics we need in leaders and in teammates, and it's just good leadership, period, for people in general, right? And sometimes there's some demographics that might need it at different times, right? So thank you for that insight. Okay, any other closing thoughts from our panelists?
I would just again stress education for everyone in your companies or businesses, starting with the onboarding process of what's available or resources are out there, so that people are comfortable asking for accommodations or seeking out resources. And again, there are a lot of free resources that are available that can be utilized to help someone perform their job responsibilities more functionally.
Thank you.
Hello? I was going to talk about what you said anyways. Well, something that George said that really stuck with me is just from a leadership standpoint, from an individual standpoint, that intentional listening piece. Every interaction, the person in front of you is just a person with their own story, and they're there, they got there somehow that you don't know, and you can learn that by asking questions and being engaged and finding a middle ground and then finding solutions together. Like, that should be the point of what we're doing each and every interaction, from leadership to the individual workers and the clients themselves. But yeah.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah, just one of the things that I did not share with you that 7 years ago I started a local newspaper called Jumbo Africa, and it was merely based on trying to educate people as to why immigrants are coming here and what they go through, but also trying to educate the host community as to what's happening, in different countries that's causing immigrants to come here. And throughout these years, one of the things that I've learned is what David said, assumptions and myth. I think we have to be able to challenge assumptions, our own assumptions or myth that we hear about people, or what we think people are, by just meeting them, talking to them, getting to know them. And I've been over and over wrong on the assumptions that I had on things, on different people. And I've come to a point where I said, no longer making any assumption. I have to meet people and talk to them, get to know them, and then from there, I'll make my own opinion as to what I'm seeing. And so it's just like, especially in the IDD or in the mental health, you just make sure you're not making assumption. Learn about people, get to meet them, and you'll be shocked or surprised at how much potential they have and how it can be part of their successful stories.
That's such a great point, and again, to reiterate on, I mean, I've seen where, hiring managers have said, hey, I work in the consulting industry for the last 10 years and a lot of travel. And so I've heard people say, well, we don't want to put that person on a plane and force them to have to travel. They're in a wheelchair. Different organizations might have things like that, or making assumptions. They think they're doing someone a favor, right? Just like, or, hey, someone has small kids at home. The assumption might be you can't travel because you got small. It's really important not to make those assumptions based on someone's background and identity and everything. So really good point, George. Thanks for reemphasizing that. So we do have about 10 minutes for questions. So just want to ask, does anybody have anything for the audience? Go ahead. I'll come to you. Hi.
So I'm autistic and also have an auditory processing issue, and I have been working with my employer for about a year and a half to get an accommodation. I attend many meetings, and sometimes it's hard to catch everything, or I mishear things because of auditory processing. So I've asked for the ability to have transcription, and I keep running into roadblocks, resistance to allowing that for fear of exposing basically HIPAA violations. So what advice do you have for someone who is seeking an accommodation and continues to meet up with roadblocks, but understanding that whatever assistance I'm asking for is going to help me be successful at my job?
That's a great question. I think the first thing is understanding what your rights are, what your legal rights are. And so connecting potentially, there are some wonderful organizations in the state. The Disability Rights of Maine does have a department that works with individuals who that are hard of hearing or may need auditory support. So knowing what your legal rights are, knowing what resources are out there. Also, what can be a challenge for employers sometimes is not understanding, right? Understanding what that is going to, how that's going to impact their job performance. There are, we've gone through this ourselves as an agency. We have a lot of HIPAA information. And so as we start exploring AI and transcription, other pieces like that. So I also would recommend if you can find a company that's been successful with that, right? And maybe that's through a resource like Disability Rights Maine or an advocacy agency like that could say, okay, here's a company that did that. Because if you can present an example to your employer of how that would work, how that would look, what the protections could be, that could bring you along. And I know that's not necessarily your responsibility, but the more information you have, the better prepared you are to work through those different pieces.
Great question. Let's go right over here.
Hi, this is a great topic. Thank you. I'm curious about the assistive technology assessments that you do. Are those ever done like proactively without actually having a certain individual? I'm thinking of in my workplace, I know that there are several individuals with ADHD, for example, or other disabilities. I'm curious if you would ever do those without like following a specific person, but just kind of touring a facility and saying, we could do this, 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 and this to help with that.
Yes. Yeah, I think that could definitely be done. It would probably be more considered like a consultation, but that would be a chance where maybe having loaner devices available to try with a group, a class, or you could kind of mix and match and see what works, and also get input from me on what is out there, what technology might be out there to solve some of the things you're looking at as a class or individually, and maybe some would need more individualized attention once you kind of started to delve into trying out different solutions, and that could lead a different direction. But yeah, definitely, I think there would be a space for that.
Yeah, and Darren will leave some cards and some flyers on the table if anybody would like to explore the resource.
I have a kind of novice question. I'm not an HR person at all. Do businesses receive any incentives to hire people with disabilities? You know how you got to check the box on the application? And what do they do with that information? Kind of like you got to check the box if you're a veteran,
Yeah, I'm not an HR person myself, so I don't know about any, but I know that, for example, with us, we have a lot of different federal and government state contracts that do outline that we have to have certain practices to promote hiring of individuals with disabilities or from different backgrounds and diversity. So that can be part of that effort to keep those contracts with different departments.
I could provide a little bit of insight on that. I am an HR guy, so I could say for the federal government, there's specific laws like the American Disabilities Act, a couple other ones that have very specific mandates for federal contractors to hire, retain, develop, and create fair practices for people with disabilities in the workplace. And so that'll cover, most employers out there are some kind of federal contractor or subcontractor, and they're gonna fall under that. And so there's things in place like you can't discriminate, or you could lose all your federal contracts, which for many companies, that's all their work, or 80% of their work, for example. Rightly so, right? And then in other cases, there are some soft, I don't wanna call it even a quota, but there's some soft benchmarks out there. We're saying, hey, employers should aspire to whatever based on the number of individuals with disabilities exist in the workplace today, there's a certain percentage that the federal government says you need to aspire to kind of reach some of those goals, right? So that's kind of what's in place for employers from, and there's affirmative action plans that contractors need to put in place as well to make sure that they are showing that they are doing different things as well. Answer your question? Yeah, okay, great. Okay, I know we had a couple questions over here. Who wants to go first? Okay.
Hi. So just a couple of comments, actually. One of the things I took away was this idea that everyone needs accommodations. I think that's an interesting idea. Like if you made that the default when someone starts, and you're not talking about disabilities or anything, you're just saying, okay, what accommodations do you need? And if that's the default, then I feel like folks with disabilities who need accommodations maybe would feel a little bit less isolated or less hesitant to ask for them. So I think that's an awesome idea. The other comment I have, I think there might be an opportunity for Alltech to kind of make yourselves a little bit more known. You're located right next to my grocery store, so I think I look at you like every week, and I didn't know kind of what you guys did. And the other thing I would say, a few years ago, I was in the market for DME, and I think, as I recall, that my doctor just like wrote down a place for me to go, and I went there, and I had like one or two choices, and I think I paid full retail, and I'm a cheapskate, and I don't like doing that. So I would have come to you guys if I'd known you existed. So I think there might be an opportunity there.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's an ongoing goal to keep getting the word out there. I've been there. September will be 3 years, and it's just me in the daily operations. So I'm doing all the marketing and everything. But I think if you were to go back, you might, if it was in Portland, a lot of the hospitals now recommend people to me from the get-go. They provide lists. So I have made those inroads, but it's such a needed service, and I think it's going to spread as it's needed even more and more going forward. So there's definitely a lot of work to be done, that's for sure.
And I think that's where all of you could be helpful. Like we're happy to provide posters or flyers for your business, or have that website as a resource. As I said, Darren gives presentations to different companies just to talk about Alltech or specific pieces. So we're available to get, and that's what Darren's done an amazing job over the last 3 years, is getting that name out and getting that word out.
Hi, good morning. I'm a social worker in behavioral health within a primary care setting. I'm also a person with several disabilities, most of which came about in the last year and a half. I'd never heard of Alltech, so I'm thrilled that you exist, because I also go to that grocery store and pharmacy probably 3 times a week, and my office is 2 minutes away. So doctor's calling me from Massachusetts, one of the specialists. Irony. So I'm thrilled to know that you exist. I'm curious about access and eligibility as far as conditions, different things, that if there is a need for different conditions, how people access if it's not through their employer, because it's clearly a service that would have been helpful for me and for a lot of the people that I work with.
Are you asking, do I have eligibility diagnosis stuff?
Eligibility and access as far as diagnoses, conditions. I know something mentioned dependent on payer, so all of those pieces.
Right. So to access the Alltech services is open to anybody, regardless of, like, I'm not looking for doctor's notes or anything like that as far as getting equipment. That's, as an individual, you can come in, look at what I have, and check things out to take with you. So there's no requirements there. The AT assessments, that was more related to just like the payer source. Where is that coming from as far as eligibility? But there's no like disqualifying diagnoses or anything like that.
Okay. I had others, but they mostly got answered. But I also wanted to ask you.
I could just add to that I think for some, there's vocational rehabilitation services that are available for individuals that they can, we work with them a lot to provide on-the-job assessments for individuals that may be eligible under a certain section of main care. They also fund different pieces of the assistive technology assessment and purchase of equipment. So there are some outside resources beyond an employer that people could access.
Great. I think my other one was, I was just going to ask about like a company assessment, not for a specific person, which someone else already asked as a consult, whether that could happen, or if we have a work group of 2 or 3 disabilities that are really common. And I think someone else asked that. So thank you.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that, case by case basis, because even though you might say they have a similar thing, but it's again, you break down, you get into talking to the individual, and one difference between 2 people can change whether or not something works for one versus the other. But definitely happy to have those conversations.
Great, these are some great questions. Any others?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. I know this wonderful lady asked a question about the state of Maine offers tax credit incentives for the employer who's hiring someone with disability. There is a work opportunity tax credit. It's between $1,200 to $9,600 for employers. Basically, any employer looking to hire like a veteran, someone with disability, folks from target groups like who's getting help from the public help, basically. So there is a credit, and there is a form 8850 IRS form. So I know this from I used to work for the Maine Department of Labor many years, and my job was promoting like for employers why they should hire someone with the targeted groups like new Mainers, someone with disability or veterans. So thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for that information. Great resource. Any other questions? Anybody else? Yeah.
Hi, I mostly work with developing ADA compliant software and websites. And my question is a little bit more on talking to the employer side. I often find that employers are very dismissive and do not really want to invest in making their websites, their software ADA compliant. And I very much struggle with how to explain to them the importance of it beyond just, you don't want to get sued. So I was wondering if you had any advice there.
Yeah, I think the biggest piece of advice would be providing more resources to these employers. We went through this experience as an agency, and when we were building Alltech's website, part of our contract with MainSite was that it had to be accessible. But the individuals who had built the overall Spurwink website didn't have the resources to be able to do that. So we ended up having to build a separate website for Alltech. That MainSite helped us through that ADA compliant process. But we found, and maybe it's different now, but there aren't as many individuals that are familiar with how to do that. So that I think would be huge, is to be able to provide those resources and give employers an idea of, it's not always super expensive to do that, right? And working with you're going to get more hits to your website if you're able to do that. So the benefits, but also the resources that are available to help them do that.
Really, really great question.
Just one thought on that. MainSite, the organization I mentioned, their webinars, they do multiple ones about creating accessible digital content on their free monthly webinars. So that might be a good resource to share too.
Yeah, really good answer. And just something to remember related to all that, inclusive practices are best practices, right? Again, we're talking about talent, we're talking about being an effective business or organization. When you implement all these different things, you're gonna unlock the talent you can attract, right? A good amount of people, we're all gonna have some type of disability at some point in our lives, all of us, right? So just something to remember in the workforce, there's a lot of people impacted and, can't attract that talent, can't retain them, can't develop them, and it could lead to mistakes, right? If you have people that are colorblind, can't see a hyperlink, for example, or can't, it just leads to issues in the organization. So, but really great answers. We're at time. These are some amazing questions, some amazing insight from our panelists, so please give them a hand. And I'd also ask you to give yourself a hand as well for being in this room. So another round of applause, please. Again, it's an important topic, and it takes all of us really to keep on being good allies of the persons with disability community, right? So thank you. I hope everybody enjoys the rest of the conference.